Namaste and welcome to the Bharat Varta podcast. I'm Roshan Karyapa. Of late, we don't just see debate on social media, but about it. And there's been plenty of controversy about regulation, freedom of speech, the role of big tech in society, sovereignty of nations, and so on. And on this podcast, we'll explore some of the related nuances. Joining me for this discussion, I have Abhishek Asthana, who's the founder of Ginger Monkey, which is a new age advertising firm that works with interesting brands like AirAsia, Colgate, Durex, and Urban Company. He also runs one of the most popular Indian social media accounts at Gabbar Singh, which has over 1 million followers on Twitter. So, welcome, Abhishek. Great to have you on the podcast.
Hi, Roshan. Great to be here and talking to you. I've been a fan of Bharat Varta podcast earlier as well, and finally I get to be here. So it's a great opportunity for me to talk to you guys. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. So thanks again. And there's plenty of like debate about social media, and there's plenty of ground to cover, really, right? So, but let me begin with a very broad question. So you've been on Twitter since 2010, right?
Yeah.
And how have you seen the influence and power of social media, right, beyond just Twitter, evolve in that time? I mean, we're talking about the last 10 or 11 years.
Yeah. So I'll begin when I joined Twitter in 2010. That was a time when Twitter used to be a kind of a select group or club of journalists or early adopters of tech. That was a time when usually any network basically when it starts, its first early adopters would be people who were from the tech industry, right? It happened with Clubhouse as well. The first users were usually from the startups and stuff, and they started discussing tech, and eventually it got run over by TikTok people, as they say, right? So same happened with Twitter as well. Initially, when we joined in, it was journalists, we have tech people talking and stuff, and then it moved on and it became bigger, and more cities also, like the city club started taking part. So so what I've seen is that Twitter has always been fringe in India, I guess. I mean, if you see the numbers as well, it hasn't really become mainstream as it. On the streets, if you ask someone about Twitter, more chances than one that he'll be not on Twitter. And you would have heard of it, of course, because of the PR that comes and the kind of news that Twitter makes. But usually when I ask someone who is active on Twitter, this question that, basically, he would be the only one active on Twitter in his friend group. He would be the only one, even you, suppose you ask other people who you talk to on a daily basis. So the point is, it has always been fringe. It has always been a den of local influencers, as I say. Imagine you would be the guy who would be the most learned guy, maybe the guy who has the pulse on the news the most in your group, and people come to you basically for kind of an opinion on anything possible. And could be tech, could be news, could be opinion, could be IT laws as well. Anything that is there. People assume that Twitter people are there first, maybe, right? So that has created this thing that it is suddenly become kind of a den of opinion makers. The government came in, the BJP government was quick to take up tech, actually, and it helped them in their electoral pursuits as well. So the power center was here. So of course, when the power center is somewhere, it will attract all kinds of people. It could attract corporate people, it could attract maybe journalists as well. So they found this to be a medium for lazy journalism as well, in the sense you certainly, some earlier people had to like visit press conferences and stuff to get some quotes from someone. Now anyone could just DM someone that find this is a story if you have a comment to make. And so it has become a very kind of accessible medium for anyone. So of course the power centers are here, the opinion makers are here, the newsmakers here are here. So a lot of news now comes from this. So of course there's a disproportionate representation of opinion on Twitter, and sometimes it becomes discourse as well. So yeah, of course Twitter has its share of Twitter has become that kind of a power center. Facebook, Instagram is still, Facebook came up, it's still a medium of masses, usually now overrun by our relatives. So Twitter has a disproportionate influence. Basis, if you compare the numbers who are there and compared to the power it wields in PR. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, just for perspective, right? I think Twitter has, maybe around 20 million users in India, and
Mm.
Facebook has north of 300 million users, right?
Yeah.
So, like 15x almost, right? And I've always found Twitter to be a sort of a very interesting medium, right? I mean, in back in 2010, 11, I think we had these, I ate a sandwich kind of tweets, right?
Yeah.
Frankly,
Yeah.
I miss that, right? And then,
Yeah.
2014 happened, and I think literally everyone realized, what a powerful tool it could be for, politics and activism and so on and so forth, right?
Mm.
And you really find any kind of content on Twitter, and it serves as a fantastic amplification device beyond the numbers itself. I think, as you
Yeah.
mentioned,
Yeah.
right, beyond the 20 million, because that doesn't do justice to the amount of signaling that Twitter has, right?
Mm.
So one of the interesting things that we've seen over the last, like, maybe 4 years or 5 years, is the fact that some of these social platforms, I mean, it could be Twitter itself or Facebook, right? uh, Initially they just, like, were the platforms, right? I mean, they were the pipes and infrastructure and whatnot, right?
Mm.
But then they started staffing their teams with the policy folks, and they started taking an active position on things, right? On whether it's like maps, or whether it's like the state of freedom of speech or laws,
Yeah.
or things to that effect. And today, if you look at it, I mean, they're sort of functioning as supranational entities, right? The new
Yeah.
United Nations of sorts, right? So
Yeah.
uh,
True.
so it becomes very confusing for someone in the government or policymakers to kind of view them still as platforms as they were originally conceptualized, right?
Yeah.
The other extreme is to sort of view them as like how you would view a New York Times or a Washington Post or a Times of India or whatever, as a publisher, right?
Yeah.
And frankly, I mean, I haven't really made up my mind in terms of one or the other. I think they're a
Mm.
mix of both, and how you view this also grossly, like, I mean, rather really significantly affects the kind of regulation and the expectations that you would have from each, right? So I'm just wondering, where do you place them? Do you place them as a platform,
Yeah.
or do you place them as a publisher? And if so,
Mm.
how should government and how should policymakers kind of look at it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is the burning question. I mean, when we've been seeing this for the last 3-4 years at least. So how I see Facebook has been duplicitous. Basically, it changes its definition basis the lawsuits it gets. Right. Sometimes it appears as if I mean, there was a recent lawsuit about from a gaming company, which basically what Facebook did was it took away their rights to any kind of Facebook pictures. There, Facebook mentioned it's a publisher, so it's governed by First Amendment. So it said that I can take all the calls in terms of rules and revoking them. And suddenly, and elsewhere, it basically tells itself as a platform that, because of course it again I mean, it shields from other laws then, right? So it's basically depending on the kind of lawsuits it gets, depending on the kind of legal soup is it in, it changes the definition actually. So nobody has actually been able to pinpoint what. So I look at that as an analogy. I mean, imagine there is a supermarket, right? And a supermarket where you go for your daily needs, and suddenly there are only two supermarkets in the city now, right? And they stock up everything. You go there and basically, and there are a lot of products there, right? You go there and to pick up stuff, and there are branded products as well. Like imagine a New York Times putting up a news story on Facebook that that New York Times is a brand, so in that supermarket there are branded products as well, and there are products which are of course not that well known, but you still buy them because you trust the supermarket, right? That okay, this supermarket will, if they're stocking this product, it must be of some quality, right? So the point is, it's like that right now. Now the point is that there is an external entity, the government, which FSSAI basically, who makes sure the quality of any kind of packaged good in India is up to the mark, basically, right? So there is an external entity, but there are some rules which the supermarket also enforces, that it can't basically sell a product beyond its MRP, and it can't sell a product which is beyond the expiry date. So there are some rules and regulations in place for the supermarket as well, right? And if suppose I buy something, a packaged good, which is I mean, in its MRP, it's within its expiry date, and still it's bad, then I can go to the consumer forum and basically apply against. And the onus, the liability is not on the supermarket, the liability will be on the brand, like what happened with the Cadbury's case, what happened with the Maggie case, right? So imagine a supermarket was not liable for anything that any Maggie that they stocked. It was directly to Nestle, right? So I think it has to work in a hybrid kind of a model. What those rules could be has to be understood between the government and the supermarket, basically. Because I don't think so they can be a pure play publisher or a pure play platform. They wield too much influence right now. They need to be, there should be enough rules in place, because you have seen, right? I mean, sometimes these institutions or these companies are also run by the political bias of the founder also flows in the company, and that is dangerous, actually, right? And what is happening with Twitter right now is that, right? I mean, they're not able to, employ a grievance officer, and all the others have done that, and they have not been able to do it because there is a reluctance to do that. They have done some kind of posturing in the liberal world that we are the upholders of free speech. Now, when they do that, they appear as if they are bent before the so-called Modi forces and the fascist forces there are. So that's why there's a reluctance there. So I think this battle will continue. This is the new tech age. The old definitions cease to exist, and we have to live in this ambiguity.
So just to pick up on what you were talking about, right? I think both the platforms and the government or regulators have to be proactive about this, right? Because as you rightly mentioned, I think it's completely new and uncharted territory for both, right? I mean, we don't know how to view these, and we don't know what the consequences could be, right? Redressal, grievance, complaints, those things are a bare minimum, I would say, right? I mean, we have to go far beyond and kind of thread some of the other topics in terms of not just abuse, but also like the kind of messages and so on and so forth, right? And oftentimes there is again another dichotomy of like freedom of speech versus responsibility, and not enabling abuse, or some kind of an open disrespect to sovereign borders and so on and so forth, right? So I wonder if there is some kind of line that you can sort of draw there, right? I mean, because all of this content, even if you view it as a platform, right, as not actually publishing it, but it's also enabling it, right? And then people do come up with this example of, okay, if you said something on a phone line, for example, should you sue the telephone company, for example, right? But I feel like we are way past that at this point of time, because it's not just infrastructure even in a publisher perspective. I mean, even the platform itself, right? Like if you look at the mechanism of retweets, for example, what is incentivized in terms of retweets and so on and so forth. I think there's a lot of sophisticated like social engineering happening, right? It's not so plain and simple like a telephone line or fiber optics or whatever, right? So yeah, how do you think about these things?
So that's a perfectly valid thing right now. I mean, if you are operating in a particular land, you have to follow the law of the land, right? I mean, you can't have your own laws and community guidelines to hide behind. Basically, if I mean, ultimately, you're a business entity, right? I mean, basically, what you're doing is you're coming into these shores. You are employing people. You have set up an entity here in India, and what you're doing is basically earning profit, right, out of whatever the advertising money you're getting. So if suppose you are a business, you're a non, it's not like an NGO or something like that, you are still liable to follow the law of the land to operate like a business in India. And maps, these are very sensitive topics anyway. I mean, ideally this should be left to free market, right? I mean, if you are a sensible and business who has business interests of its shareholders in mind, you would not do that. I mean, you would not like jeopardize a big market like India by silly oversight of not, I mean, getting the maps right and stuff. So that is something which you assume a large company would do. I mean, any company like Nestle, when it got into the soup of that Maggie-led controversy, it course corrected, it took its stock back, though even if they thought that fine, our product is good, they went back to the drawing board and got things right. They did a campaign, they apologized for it as well. That's how you do business in India. I mean, it's not like that you say that, fine, I come from a hallowed land and whatever I say and put forward is right, and you are the heathens of third world and you don't know what you're talking about, right? We have a better standard of free speech. That doesn't work that way, right? I mean, and that's where the government also has been a bit, I would say, polite, I guess, in terms of their redressal, because what has happened is because they have put too much at stake. I mean, they have too much at stake in Twitter, because since 2014, all of their government machinery and their ministers and everyone has been told that Twitter is the medium to be, where you create, you showcase all the good work that you do, and it gets percolated into PR. So that they are knee deep into this. So even though they have launched a separate, not they have launched, and someone has come up with a separate social network, which appears to be an alternative, but still our prime minister is not there on that platform yet, right? And I mean, they could have taken that call. I mean, there have been so many wranglings between the government and and Twitter, but it hasn't happened yet. And it shows that the government is still in two minds, and it, I mean, sends a signal to Twitter people as well that, okay, I mean, we have some kind of heft in terms of negotiations. So that is there. I mean, but ultimately, in an ideal scenario, in an ideal free market, a particular business should totally abide by the law of the land. If it doesn't agree with the law of the land, it should leave. Simple.
Right, right. Interesting. And let's look at the problem of like regulating content itself, right? I mean, because it's a fairly complicated issue, right? And not just complicated in terms of scale, but also the quality of content and the nature of content itself. It could be anything basically, right? And what is the right way to do this even, because so do we rely on algorithms, or do we rely on like some kind of a team of people, or do you rely on some kind of a very bottom up, the old fashioned Reddit way of like, or maybe the Craigslist way of like spam and reporting and moderatorship and so on and so forth. It's again a very difficult topic, right? I mean, it's a very difficult thing to solve for, really. So have you thought of what could be a potential method to solve some of these things?
See, it again boils down to that the thin line between being a platform and a publisher, right? The moment there is subjectivity in terms of any kind of call to take, whether this is maybe derogatory, whether this is harming the community or not, editorial discussion comes in. The moment editorial discussion comes in, you become a publisher then, right? I mean, you are taking a call, you're taking a subjective call for something. A lot of other things like which can be handled by the algorithm, like porn, like violence, like graphic violence and stuff, then can be taken care of. Or you can, I mean, maybe search for keywords, basically are like Nazi, Hitler, this, that, and whatever, right? You can do that. But after a point of time, there's a lot of other stuff which can still pass those filters and still be problematic. And then that is where the editorial discussion comes into place. And that's why it's a very thin line between being a platform and a publisher. The moment you have an editorial discussion coming in, that is the moment you will have subjectivity. And subjectivity is, of course, governed by bias. And nobody can be neutral or bias free. So there is, and the point is that the volumes are so huge that you can't have like thousands of editors, I mean, coming in. I mean, Twitter is, at the end of the day, is a tech company. It should have more engineers than editors, right? So to basically curate that content, you need enough people, and enough people with that loss of bias, or I mean, the bias should not be there, so that they can be objective in their assessment. So it's a very difficult thing. I mean, Twitter has chosen its path. Twitter has openly been said that, fine, we are left liberals. We have that bias, and you have to live with it. We'll curate content that is on Twitter with that bias in mind. So they have been pretty open about it. And the point is that it's difficult for people to acclimatize with it, that fine, these guys are biased and the content we are seeing are coming from a filter which might not adhere to our political bias, right? So it's a difficult thing. I mean, I don't think so I have an answer for this right now. I mean, either you solve it through tech, and also this recent phenomena of fact checkers have also proven to be useless, basically. That again, these guys have suddenly become those doyens of like, we are the jurisdiction of news, and we have found that these guys are also biased, and the issue with their technique itself is archaic. I mean, they are using Google search to basically figure out that if suppose a news is fact or not. They don't have feet on the ground. I mean, a publication basically who has feet on the ground is reporting something, and if you are the one who is trying to adjudicate whether this is right or wrong, and if you don't have feet on the ground, then you are in no position to judge that, right? Suppose something happens in Jaunpur in UP, and there has been a riot there, and someone has reported something. And these guys have to adjudicate whether it's false or true. And if they don't have any feet on the ground in Jaunpur, they're in no, I mean, they can't do that, right? They can't just Google search stuff and tell you, okay, this is fact, this is fiction. So I guess all those models are also not proving to be worth, and me basically ending up in one bucket or the other bucket, basically. So it's difficult. I mean, we have to figure out a solution for this, but I don't think so I have a solution here right now. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's certainly a complex problem, right? And certainly not something that can be solved on this podcast at any rate, right? Uh, this whole proposal of grievance officers and having a formal redressal mechanism, right? I mean, that seems like perhaps the bare minimum that one should do, right? So, what do you think about that specifically? Do you think it could work?
Yes, I think, see, whenever you make someone accountable, right? I mean, see, this chief grievance officer and the new IT laws, what they have done is it has made it someone can be criminally prosecuted as well. It's not just a monetary fine that you can get away with. So there is more onus on these guys. There's more pressure on these guys to perform and be maybe impartial, right? I mean, now that employees as well, if suppose you are found to be indulging in some kind of rumor mongering, or some platform is doing that, then there is criminal prosecution available as well for the grievance officer and the employees as well. So I think it's a bit harsh. I mean, it of course flies in the face of ease of business, but I guess this is necessary. I guess, I mean, you need to have someone responsible. You can't be just as I said earlier as well, that you can't change your stance of being a platform and publisher basis the kind of acquisition that is coming your way, right? So you need to be someone, let's say a grievance officer who's there, who the government can talk to at least. Right now, there's no redressal mechanism. Right now, suppose something happens, the government basically tries to raid a Twitter office, and when they go there, they find out that the office is on work from home. So there's no one to talk to actually. So they keep wondering whether the Twitter MD is the one who's the purveyor of the affairs in India, so that they should reach him. And this guy says that no, I'm an US employee, so I'm a Twitter enthusiast or something like that.
Right. Yeah, that's hilarious. So,
Yeah.
all of this lends itself very nicely and makes the case for why we need to have indigenous platforms, right? Why can't we have an indigenous Twitter, Facebook, or whatever else that we have, right? And also, we're not the only ones facing this problem. I'm sure there are others in the world who are asking similar questions off of these platforms, right? I mean, so it could be Nigeria, for example, or some Latin American country or whatever else kind of country, right? And so do you think that we should actively, when I say we, I mean, do you think the government should actively promote like indigenous platforms and maybe export our own variety of social media to the world?
I think, see, of course, monopolies are bad. Of course, when there's a particular platform, Twitter is I don't think Twitter is a social media platform. It's a category in itself, right? Where bite-sized stuff comes out. You can't compare it to Instagram or Facebook. It is a category in itself. And when in that category, Twitter has a monopoly, it's not great usually, right? Because they have they know they can do whatever and get away with it. So if suppose there is a competitor there right there at the doorsteps who is basically knocking on the doors and saying, we can take away your business if suppose you don't comply, right? So that is when there is some pressure. Competition is always good. So if India is promoting such platforms, it's always good. I think when there is competition, of course, it keeps both of them on their toes to basically address problems that are there. But the ultimate issue will still remain, right? I mean, you can create different buckets, but the issue of let's say the water is contaminated, and I mean, changing the bucket won't solve it, right? If you can't filter the water that's coming in the bucket right now, even if you change the bucket, the same problem will reoccur again, right? So that problem will still remain. And the difficulty is that our lenses and our solutions are still archaic. The solutions are suited to govern or basically regulate a newspaper industry maybe, or electronic media, right? We haven't still figured out how to regulate this beast, which is basically everyone is a content creator. There are so many. So on Twitter, on TV, there are like 500 channels. You can regulate them, right? There are so many news channels that you can regulate easily. Ads are regulated. News content is regulated. The kind of films you see on TV are regulated. Bollywood is regulated. everywhere there's a board which passes off content, but only on the instantaneous nature of the social platforms makes it really difficult for you to come in and regulate stuff. And the point is, again, regulation will again come with its own bias. Yeah, I mean, we have accused censor board for that. We have accused any kind of regulatory body that is there will be accused of some kind of bias. But in this case, because it's a different beast altogether, the different kind of medium altogether, we still have to solve this through algorithm plus human or a hybrid model or whatever. That problem still has to be solved. So indic platforms or not, the root cause will remain. It will still be sticky. It will still be difficult to regulate content which is there, to figure out who should be accountable. So that problem will remain actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I kind of agree with you. I think what we're looking at is the symptoms, right? And the problem is much deeper. And we could have another type of platform, but then I mean the same problems are going to come up at some point. But at the
Yeah.
very least, I think we will have greater control in terms of like our own companies and respecting the law of the land and have better laws, right? I mean, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As I said, competition will help. I mean, this will again create some kind of competition in a free market, of course. Then they'll be incentivized to course correct. Right now, there's no incentive for Twitter to course correct. It's said, fine, whatever is working right now with me. I'm getting more users. Your government ministers are tweeting on my platform, even though they have been castigating me all around, but they still come to my platform to disseminate stuff. So if there is no incentive, as now that coup has come up and ministers are going there, and there was a 2-day hiatus that Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad took and went there and started cooing, as they say. And it of course, it showed some kind of posturing, right? That fine, there is an alternative out there. So that again, Twitter would have put some pressure on Twitter that fine, there is an alternative, there is a redressal there. So that's why they are now more polite and in terms of prompt with their answers and stuff. Yeah. So it will help. Of course, it will help. Yeah.
Right. And I'm actually curious how brands are viewing all of this that is happening, right? I mean, are they even like cognizant of some of this stuff? Are they, actually like, do they have a strategy about this stuff? I mean, since you talk to a few of these folks, right? So how are they looking at all of this?
Yes. So I'll tell you, brands have been at the forefront. What brands have done is that the moment they find out that, so they don't want to show their ads on video. I'll give you an example of YouTube. Last year, what happened about 2 years ago when I was in an FMCG company, my previous employer, what we found out was that there were some child pornography videos on YouTube, right? And our ads were running before that. So it was a
Wow.
major problem. So the brands took a call and boycotted YouTube for a month. So,
Okay.
and what happens is whenever you cut the supply, and this was not just us, this was a consortium of a lot of FMCG companies who are big spenders in advertising, that they cut off their expenditure on YouTube suddenly. And that, of course, would have hurt someone in the ranks, basically, whose numbers wouldn't have been met. And that created a lot of flutter, and then they course corrected themselves. So I think brands have a kind of they have the jugular of these companies in their hands, basically, right? Because they fund these companies usually with their advertising. All of them are usually, they don't have a subscription model any of these platforms. They just buy one digital ads. And if the people who are the biggest spenders suddenly find out that, okay, I mean, it's not worth putting our ads on your platform, suddenly it hurts them, and they course correct pretty fast. It hasn't brands have taken that call a lot of times. And I'll tell you, a lot of brands are jittery about Twitter as well, because there's a lot of hate out there. So what happens is, if suppose they have seen, the similar kind of communication they have done on different platforms, if they do it on Twitter, one person, and there's an avalanche of basically kind of tweets that come in and boycott karo, uninstall karo, this. So they are very jittery. I mean, they want to be like politically correct all the time, but they're also like of this. They're like, it has side and upside, because the reach itself is limited. I'm not reaching out to many people on that platform. And if suppose they do something wrong, there's a lot of downside for that, right? So yeah, brands are, of course, and brands are very, very selfish. It's about their self-interest. They see that if my brands are put in bad light, if suppose there is some campaign against a brand and it makes it to PR, it sounds bad, it looks bad. So these guys are wary. These guys are in talks with these guys, with the platforms all the time. We had representatives coming in every week, trying to maintain that relationship so that we keep spending money with them. And we use days that on your platform. What are you doing to basically curtail that? And they used to tell us that a lot of teams are working on that. And so there is competence, of course, but in terms of we are worried more about, in terms of brands are more worried about actual graphic stuff that they want to associate with. I mean, uh, finer points like where there is subjectivity involved, editorial discussion is involved. They are still away from that, in the sense they think that these guys will sort their stuff, but the algorithmic stuff they are worried about, that there should not be a miss there in terms of violence, porn and stuff. They don't want to associate with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Brands love the fact that you get reach and personalization, right, on social media. Like perhaps, I mean, no other channel in the world today, right? But I feel like even after 10 years, I mean, they haven't figured out what to do when someone talks back to you, right? Now, an ad, a TV ad could be playing, and I could be cursing at the TV, but the brand doesn't hear back, and neither do like 10 of my neighbors, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that you could have this and incidentally, it always happens on promoted tweets, right? I mean, you have this promoted tweet, and then I always look at the replies, and the replies are pretty damn like scathing, right? So I guess that's a larger problem that brands haven't really figured out, what to do when someone talks back to you. And yeah, and you could be spending all of that budget, but then here is a guy who comes up with a witty sort of a campaign or a hashtag and something, and it could totally like upend your campaign, right? I mean, it could like mobilize people, and then you have this sort of you have he or she has probably enabled this mob against you. And that is something that I think brands are also very, very wary of. So I think they do tread very carefully, I feel.
Yeah. So as I said, that they again they look at the upside and the downside. If suppose there is plenty of downside than an upside, imagine being on a platform which has a limited reach, which is of course a subset of an Instagram, maybe, right, or a Facebook, and they would rather spend their monies on a platform which has a bigger reach than somewhere where they spend money as well and get blowback on that. So that's where I mean, if you look at the business of Twitter in India, it's not been that rosy. I mean, they are growing, but even that is reflected in the share price as well, globally as well. I mean, Twitter and Facebook nearly started at the same time, 2-3 years apart, and you see the size. Though Twitter has a disproportionate, share of voice in terms of whatever comes out of it, but in terms of revenues, it's far behind. And that is one of the reasons, because it's toxic sometimes. It's difficult for brands to navigate, right? If that is amount of tweets they get, so it becomes difficult. Yeah.
Right. I think in all of this, there is a larger problem with big tech itself, right? And how it kind of treats India as a market, right? You could very well make the case with Google, for example, with its Play Store, right? That it chooses to promote a particular type of app over another, right? Because these processes, again, are extremely opaque. There's a lot of information asymmetry. There is no, again, I mean, if your app is like kicked off the store, that redressal mechanism can be fairly complicated. You don't have an office here that you can go and meet people or even write to, right? So it gets fairly complicated, right? I mean, when you look at big tech itself, or look at the way, for example, Amazon behaves sometimes, right? In entirely discretionary, manner. So what is the long-term resolution, in your opinion, for big tech itself? I mean, I think we've been able to leverage a lot of this for a lot of value over the last 10 years, but I feel like we're reaching that point of marginal utility or so, right, where I think we need to start like asking back some of the things that we were shy to kind of do maybe like 5 or 10 years back, right?
No, you're right. Actually, see, the thing is, that is the problem of monopolies, right? Once you become big enough, once you are the only player in the market, it becomes then you feel like that. Fine, now the time to seek rent out of this monopoly, right? What Google Apps Play Store also does. I mean, recently it said that any kind of payments made on any apps that are there in Play Store, I'll get a 30% cut on that. And Paytm basically came up and said that fine, this is like a monopoly that we'll start our own apps ecosystem. So what happens is there are blowbacks that come up, and these guys try to navigate that PR shitstorm. And but the issue is that this will keep on happening. I mean, once the monopoly is there, like Amazon, I've heard of several people who have listed their products on Amazon, that what happens is once Amazon learns that this particular product with these features, with this kind of customer base is buying such thing, it will replace that with its own product maybe, right? And basically you're out of business suddenly. Imagine a particular manufacturer who has listed stuff and seeing like steady cash flow, and suddenly it's been replaced because Amazon knows about the customer, Amazon knows about the product, what they're looking for, what kind of reviews they're looking at, what are the keywords they're searching for. So it has way too much knowledge for basically to have a fair play. And that is going to happen. I mean, big tech, of course, has I mean, right now you look at Facebook and Twitter, Facebook and Google, they corner about 70 to 80% of revenues, ad revenues of newspapers or news media, right? So that's why it's quite, I mean, very difficult for any kind of news outlet to survive basis just revenues. I mean, it can't pay salaries as well. So that most of the people these days are on a model of donation, right, where they basically ask people to donate for survival. And you know, you've been in the business as well. Ad revenues are absolutely nothing, and they can't pay for your salaries, right? It's way too low. And the kind of cuts Google, if suppose you have a Google ad set up on your website, the kind of monies they have been squeezing people, they have been squeezing content creators by just being the fact that they can distribute your content. I was from an FMCG business as well. There were distributors as well in FMCG business, but the distributors had a cut of 2-3%, right? Here it has reversed. Basically, the distributors become so big that it's squeezing both the manufacturer and the consumer, right? So that is a kind of disproportionate because the distributor is now so big that it says that I can replace any of you, I can start manufacturing my own stuff, right? And I can bring in new consumers as well. I mean, I don't care about both of you. So that is the issue right now. It is there. I mean, traditionally distributors should have a role in the system, in the value chain, but not so much that they cornered most of the numbers, because ultimately the person who is manufacturing the content or products should be the one who should be earning margins there, but it has reversed right now. So that's the difficulty. Yeah, I mean, that's a problem each of us, any content creator, faces in India, abroad as well, that the revenues are largely skewed towards these two organizations, right? And the only way to earn right now is like brand endorsement, but then again they also come with the different kind of riders. I mean, every other content creator has to think that whether they should do this brand endorsement or not, because that is the only source of income right now. The ad revenues are nil. YouTube is squeezing it, Google ads are squeezing it. So what does one do? Yeah, very difficult.
Right. So what do you make of the global corporate tax that's been proposed, by G7? Because I think what they're saying is a 15% flat cut, on all of these big tech guys, right? But there again, I mean, I feel there's an issue of how you recognize revenue itself, right? Because I think the running joke was that, you look at India for DAOs and, US for ARPU, right? Because there's that whole balancing of sorts that happens, right? So do you think anything will come out of that?
I'm not much conversant on that conversation about the G7 tax cut, but in terms of DAO and ARPU, there's a good example of Clubhouse recently, right? Clubhouse has suffered in terms of DAUs in the US. It has not gone up, but of course ARPU is good there. Of course, ARPU basically runs with the DAU, but in India they have seen like an exponential rise in DAUs. If you see the curve, these are the most of the numbers that are coming in are from India after they launched on Android, of course. Otherwise, it was dying pretty much after the initial burst of Elon Musk and other people were there. So Indians are great in number, but in terms of wallet to spend money on content, we are still far behind. I mean, it's difficult for us to spend beyond. I mean, Netflix is still struggling. I mean, Amazon Primes of the world are still struggling. They're spending so much money in content creation, but it's very difficult to get paying subscribers and to retain them as well. I mean, it's not just about getting the new customers, but to make them pay month on month. What I've seen is people taking the subscription in a month where Sacred Games is released, or maybe a Family Man is released, and the very next month they unsubscribe. So that's what the thing is. It's very difficult to keep them on board.
Right. Yeah, a lot of it is changing, right? And even though, I mean, I think behaviors are changing and so on, I think we still have a far way to go in terms of those specific consumer behaviors of more mature economies and so on, right? Just to close the loop, right? And this has been a fascinating conversation. We've spoken about many different aspects and nuances, right? Just to close the loop, how do you see social media landscape maybe 10 years from now, right? What do you think will happen? Do you think that there will be some kind of a balkanization of the internet, right? I mean, where India will have its own, US will have its own, and somebody else will have its own, or do you see some sort of like a very decentralized, like a blockchain sort of a network layer coming up, or do you see some kind of a coalition? What do you think? What do you think will happen over the next 10 years?
So yeah, see, going by the trends right now, I think there'll be more and more players coming up right now, right? I mean, and these players won't be the players who would be happy to be assumed or maybe subsumed by the larger players. These would be the ones who would stay the course, like the new one that has come, Coup in India, and there'll be like a larger regional play, I guess. See, once tech becomes commoditized, right now that the tech which Twitter runs on, it's not something of rocket science, right? I mean, any Indian tech ecosystem can also create a similar kind of quality of product, right? And once tech becomes commoditized, a more regional play will come in, and and of course, governments once they figure out how to tackle this thing. So initially, government also took a lot of time to regulate TV. Then also they took and far longer back they took time to regulate newspapers. Once they achieved a kind of a steady state, so that steady state hasn't been achieved with digital yet. Once that steady state is achieved, where we know how to tackle this beast, and there'll be more and more players coming up, because right now people are confused right now. If suppose there is a let's say Ambani who wants to also float a similar service like Twitter, will still confused that how to go about it. That the revenues are still not sure that how exactly that you can earn revenue through this. B, the regulatory environment is still very chaotic. So there'll be far bigger problems to solve before more and more players can come in right now. And once that, as I said, once that steady state is achieved, then you'll see more and more players coming in, and more and more niches being developed, like subreddits. I see. I mean, you have your own few subreddits you go to. My Reddit is quite different from your Reddit and from anyone else, right? So what happens is we will find our own niches. We'll go to those networks, talk to our people, own people. The era of basically once we are. So I think India as a nation also is a bit insecure right now, because it's going through that transition of earning and subsistence and basically earning more money. I mean, we are going through that phase. Once we become a more secure nation, we won't need more social validation as such. I guess we'll be satisfied with being in our own shell, maybe talking to 4 other people out there, but being secure. Right now, what is happening is because suddenly the world has opened up, people are trying to get validation out there. That okay, I mean, validate my existence, because we have been always a collective society, and we are moving towards individualistic society right now. So that is what is changing right now. Once we have moved towards that kind of archetype where we become individuals assured in our own existence, I guess we'll find our own niches. Then we'll be happy being with like 50 other people in a group. That's it. I mean, we don't need like masses, those retweets, likes, and everything to validate our existence. So it's a utopian concept, but right now, but I think that we will achieve 10 years down the line when the tech becomes commoditized. We'll go there. Yeah.
No, that's like a couple of very important points that you bring up, right? One, I think the fact is that tech is commoditized, right? Maybe 10 years back, I mean, when we used to see that sad fail whale thing that used to pop up, right? I mean, surely, I mean, handling scale is certainly not easy, but I won't say that, there's only one company in the world that can do that, right? I mean, for sure, I mean, there might be plenty more, a greater number than one at least, right? So I think some kind of decentralization of that sort might happen. My own hope is that, there would be some kind of a single sign-on where, you're part of everything and nothing, right, at once. and so that could happen. And I think like future generations, just to build on what you said, I mean, they'll probably look back and wonder, like, hey, there was all of this, all like, think of whatever drug you want to think of, right? All of this heroin lying around, and you guys just went willingly and like started consuming so much of this, right? I mean, what were you guys thinking? I think they might have they might have that kind of a view, right? I mean, they're probably more mature. So you're right. I mean, I think we're seeing a very interesting sort of a transitionary period where consumers themselves, as consumers, we're not sure what this thing is. I mean, we're seeing the virtues of it, we're seeing the vices, and it's a combination of both. And we're also seeing regulation itself in its very nascent form at this point of time, right? Where we're just saying that if you don't like something, you're going to ban it. That's it. Certainly interesting times ahead. And thank you so much for joining us on this podcast, Abhishek, and for lending your perspective. It was an immensely enjoyable conversation. I really liked talking to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Roshan. It was great to be here.
Thank you.
And
thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Bharat Varta podcast. If you want to see more content like this, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We started Bharat Varta to facilitate long-form discussions on politics, policy, and culture. We don't necessarily endorse anything that was said in this episode. If you wish to offer us feedback, do reach out to us on social media. We are at Bharat Varta on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You could also get in touch with us on our website, www.bharatvarta.in. The links are in the description below. Until next time, stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.